Gender ideology is advancing in schools across Britain. For the first time, pupils are now being punished for questioning teachers who demand to be addressed as the opposite gender, or as non-binary, as parents finally speak out.
But the school is saying the teacher must be addressed as mixed. I told them no, that is not happening.
Teachers have lost their jobs trying to blow the whistle, as vulnerable children proclaim they are born in the wrong body and parents are kept in the dark.
It was college policy not to tell the parents, and then the college then told my student how to go about changing her name and gender. All then led to my suspension and to my subsequent dismissal. Nobody's going to employ me. I can't get back into industry. I certainly can't get into teaching. I can't even drive a van for Tesco's.
Others have been banned from working with children for life.
But what happens to every single person is that they are told, you must not speak about this.
Some parents have withdrawn their kids from state education after their school embraced transgender ideology and faced an onslaught from their community.
Basically, we got a letter back and they delayed it just before the summer holidays, so we couldn't really respond properly. They're saying, oh, we're now closed. We just got it right at the last minute to say, basically, your child is and you are transphobic if you don't treat this boy as a real female. One of the mums still puts two fingers up every time she sees one of us.
For the first time, GB News reveals how schools and councils across the country have splurged thousands of pounds each on woke education courses, as the rates of teachers and others barred from working with children soars. As Labour looks set to double down on transgenderism, how did we get here? When did Britain become so obsessed with woke gender ideology?
Guidance for schools on how to manage children who may wish to change their gender will be published today. It's understood the guidelines, which are not legally enforceable, will require schools to inform parents if their children say they'd like to change genders. There'll be no obligation to allow students to socially transition or to provide gender-neutral facilities. Teachers will also be given the choice to opt out of using a student's chosen pronoun if they have a reasonable objection. The Stonewall charity says the guidance has not properly considered the needs of trans and gender-diverse youth.
December 2023, the Tory government announced new guidance for schools in dealing with kids who are struggling with their gender identity. After years of sounding the alarm, parents welcomed the move that appeared to mark the end of transgender ideology. But this wasn't the end. Parents have contacted GB News to blow the whistle after their children were forced to call their female teacher Mix, a non-binary alternative to the normal Miss or Sir that you would expect. When questioning what the term meant, the parent claims their child was sent out of class and given detention. In meeting after meeting with the school, the parent refused to tell the child to use non-binary language, saying it didn't match with their own beliefs. GB News has seen documents from the school where senior staff say the pupil could return to class but must not address the teacher with speech. The child would have to raise their hand in silence instead. Not very inclusive. Communication from other parents at the same school confirm this experience is not limited to just one pupil. The parent's identity has been disguised to protect their safety.
What is mix? I've never heard of it. I feel like this teacher doesn't know who she is, bringing their issues to the kids. I've never had any problems with the school before this. There have been assemblies about being kind to those who are different, but nothing like that. We had no idea of this policy. Where does that leave us as parents? I don't want to teach my child that. The school told me I have to move with the times, but what happened to knowing who you are? She doesn't know who she is. They're saying this is their policy and we have to respect what the teacher wants, but I don't want to teach my child that. My child is allowed back into lessons now, but the school is saying the teacher must be addressed as mix. I told them no, that is not happening. My child is really anxious. They think they're going to be bullied. My child is not going back in that class. I regret sending them to that school. I feel like I've let them down.
Nigel and Sally Rowe felt forced to withdraw their children from state school after male classmates started coming in wearing dresses.
We knew the parents were very involved in the school. We were doing weekly assemblies, very welcomed into the school, had good relationships. And it was becoming more and more obvious that her son was getting more interested in girl toys, and then it kind of progressed to wearing a dress. So it was just, there was no like consultation with parents or anything. I got wind of it from the parent that morning thinking, oh, they're just having a meeting about it and just discussing it. When our younger son was 6, a boy turned up, joined his class, and then he started announcing he would change. So from day to day, sometimes a boy, sometimes a girl. So every day he'd change, he'd dress with shorts or trousers or with a skirt or dress. So this was even more confusing. And actually our son did say, Dad, I'm confused. Aren't boys boys and girls girls? You can't change.
The straight acceptance of this child's new gender by the adults, the teachers, startled them. So they put their concerns in a letter. They were shocked when the response accused them of transphobic behaviour.
We got a letter back and they delayed it just before the summer holidays, so we couldn't really respond properly. They're saying, oh, we're now closed. We just got it right at the last minute to say, basically, your child is, and you are transphobic if you don't treat this boy as a real female, if you don't use the correct pronouns. It was and we were quite shocked because this was a school that we had been very...
It's a Church of England school.
It's a Church of England school.
You wouldn't think that they would endorse that.
Nigel and Sally weren't able to shield their sons from confusion. And one evening, what they had hoped to avoid came true. One son told Nigel his friend was now a girl.
Putting my younger son to bed one night, he said, Dad, I'm confused. I thought we had boys and we have girls. And I was, well, yeah, son, we do have boys and we have girls. And you could go into detail and say, well, yeah, boys have willies, girls have vaginas. It's pretty simple, and it was just how we're all made. And then he said, well, my friend at school has become a girl, and that was very difficult. I didn't know how to really address that, to be honest with you. And I said, well, no, son, it's not right. I try to put it in simple terms, but it's very confusing for a child. They just don't get it because, in their basic mind, they see other children, what they have physically, and they know there's a difference.
The couple went to court over the way schools were handling transgenderism. The government decided to settle the case, and the Tories issued long-awaited guidance that was hoped would end the whole debacle. Nigel and Sally received an onslaught from the community for daring to challenge the trans activists.
We, procrastinated about, speaking out more publicly about it because we didn't want to ruffle. We're in a small community. We didn't want to ruffle feathers. We didn't want to upset people. But I think it came to the point where we realised that actually it's beyond that. What harm is this doing to young children? And actually it was important that something was done, and we spoke out about it for the benefit of all children. We've had slander, shame on you. Shouldn't even be showing your face in the place I live.
Even outside our house.
Had someone swerving their van. One of the mums still puts 2 fingers up every time she sees one of us.
They fear their hard-won battle will be lost now Labour are in power.
No one should be penalised. You shouldn't have to give pronouns of someone. You shouldn't, whether you're a parent, a child or a teacher, you shouldn't have to. And yet people are still being disciplined.
It's a free speech issue.
That's what these children.
It's a free speech issue. The law is that parents are the primary educators of their children. And ultimately, you ask any parent in the country, and they'll say, I'm going to bring up my child the way I see fit.
Stories like these can be heard across Britain. Councils and schools have signed up to implementing woke teachings, giving charities thousands of pounds of public money in the process. One organisation who had worked with over 300 schools and scores of councils attacked the validity of long-term relationships and even marriage, things that most people embrace. The charity also embraced the idea that one can change their gender. We Can Reveal, a school in Buckinghamshire, paid the charity to run workshops for their teenage pupils, which covered puberty and the body, sex and reproductive and sexual health. Councils too are paying for the privilege. Bexley Borough Council paid the same charity over £2,000 for training on relationship and sex education. Islington paid £200 for advice and guidance. Northumberland paid nearly £1,100 for what it calls access to resources and seminars on relationship and sex education for children. Wandsworth admitted it had used their services, but refused to say how much was paid. These amounts are aside from what individual schools would pay on top. Kevin Lister, a maths teacher for decades, spoke out when one of his students decided to transition, and he ultimately lost his job.
I had a female student in my class who sent me a message on Teams asking me to refer to her as a male. I immediately raised a safeguarding concern, asking if there was parental consent, if she was able to make an informed decision, and if there was a risk that she would self-medicate with cross-sex hormones. And I referred to the Kira Bell case to highlight that this was an extremely dangerous situation. The college response to that safeguarding concern was to tell me that it was college policy not to tell the parents. And then the college then told my student how to go about changing her name and gender. Parallel to that, there was a transgender training course that was run by the college, and it was run by a teacher called Employee C. Employee C announced her credentials and qualifications to give this course at the training session. She said that her qualifications were that her daughter is now presenting as a male, and in her words, she had directly supported 4 other students or 4 other transgender students in the college. So I immediately raised a second safeguarding concern to say that the trainer was using biased material from mermaids and other trans activist organizations. Instead, it was used as a referral of me to the Lado on grounds of being transphobic. That all then led to my suspension and to my subsequent dismissal.
Barred for life from working with children, Mr. Lister is now unemployed.
Swindon Borough Council is highly pro-transgender, highly pro-pride, and recommended and accepted the college's accusations against me. DBS then subsequently put me on the children's barred list. I am banned from teaching, I'm banned from pursuing my profession, I am banned from anything to do with children, so I can't even help at my local athletics club as a club official. And that's for life. Nobody's going to employ me. I can't get back into industry. I certainly can't get into teaching. I can't even drive a van for Tesco's, because to drive a van for Tesco's, you need to be DBS cleared. So one of the things I did after being fired was I qualified to be a van driver. So I've got 3 degrees. I've got 2 master's degrees and a BSc. I find myself the thing I can be qualified to do at this stage of my life is to become a van driver, and even that is difficult to do.
The Employment Tribunal ruled that Mr. Lister was not unfairly dismissed, that his belief in biological sex was protected, but that he had not respected the school's policy to adhere to preferred pronouns. Kevin Lister was placed on the child's barred list and has received a minded to retain letter in which the DBS told him they, quote, have concerns about the risk you may pose to children. Mr. Lister is appealing this decision. The DBS say they do not collect data on why teachers are barred, but GB News can reveal that rates have soared in recent years. In 2010, just over 21,000 were barred. Last year, the figure had risen to 87,000. But how did we get here? Mr. Lister blames the Equality Act, implemented in 2010 by the outgoing Labour government.
Everybody has gone mad on this. This transgender ideology was introduced into the education system at the behest of the Tavistock Centre and mermaids. It was all incorporated into the guidance documents for the by the DFE into the safeguarding documents and so forth. It got disseminated down into the schools and into the colleges. The head teachers in the schools and the colleges largely just went along with what they were taught. There's this absolute systematic top level down perversion of the whole education system in this country. The whole education system has been moved from what it should be, which is a vehicle to teach young people facts and knowledge and critical thinking and engagement with society, to this ideological construct to stifle free speech, to stifle debate, and to allow vociferous minorities, such as the transgender community, to impose their views on the majority. So yes, it is a complete madness from top to bottom, and almost nobody can stand against it. We have allowed the legal system in this country to become corrupted. Introduced in this country in 2010 something called the Equality Act, which almost everybody knows about, and it's plastered up and down schools, and the protected characteristics are posted up and down schools for children to memorize. And we've ended up in this situation now where the Equality Act stands above every other law in this country, every other law. So when I went to the employment tribunal in the preliminary hearing, the judge said to me that all the other laws that I quoted, the Children's Act, the Education Act, Health and Safety at Work Act, were not to be considered in court, only the Equality Act.
The Act dictated public bodies should respond to the needs of certain protected characteristics, such as age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion or belief, sex, and sexual orientation. Organisations created diversity and inclusion departments to comply with the law. These departments often pushed what we now know as woke policies, like gender ideology and critical race theory, where subjects are taught about white privilege and inherent racism. Lawyers defending those who have dared to question trans activists say there are hundreds of cases where people have lost their jobs. Andrea Williams works with Joshua Sutcliffe, a former teacher who was dismissed for accidentally misgendering his student.
He called into our office saying that he had been suspended from his classroom as a maths teacher for accidentally what was described as misgendering a child in his class. And from that moment, Joshua was suspended and put into isolation. And there are a multitude of these cases. Not all of them have the profile of Joshua Sutcliffe. But what happens to every single person is that they are told, you must not speak about this.
Andrea Williams says she's fought gender ideology for years.
What's striking to me is that we're making the children the soldiers on this ideological battlefield. And they're not ready for it because they're children. And our job as adults, as parents, indeed as the government and as parents and as teachers, is to protect and look after our little children. We've ended up with a so-called religion of being inclusive, but in fact it's not inclusive at all, and it cannot tolerate any dissent.
Many schools will say they're just following the Equality Act. What is that and why? And is it actually that they do need to do this to follow the Equality Act?
It's all a bit of a myth. The idea, and it's an excuse, that we are following an Equality Act, we're following equality and diversity, it's a myth. And in fact, it's folklore, in fact. Strictly speaking, the Equality Act also protects freedom of religion, freedom of Christianity, so it would entirely protect these parents and children, anyone that believes in science, that believes in biological reality, male and female. It would entirely protect those people. But such is the way in which the Equality Act has been construed and lived out and developed in our culture, merely in our culture and in our policies, not necessarily in hard law, but increasingly that way, is that you have a hierarchy of rights, and people believe that in the hierarchy of rights, again strangely, that biological sex can be changed, but also that sexual orientation cannot be changed.
Mr. Sutcliffe felt he had no option but to stand up for what he believes.
Well, I would say it's not the nice thing to do to go along with what the falsehood that they are believing. I would argue that's not the nice thing to do. For me, the nice thing to do is to tell them the truth and to say that it's not possible to change your gender. I didn't, of course, do that.
Why did you feel that you couldn't abide by the school's policy?
I thought it was outside of their jurisdiction to ask a teacher to go against their convictions. Their primary responsibility is for academics. I think in this case they should have seen that there was a differing of opinions and possibly take action accordingly. One thing, an obvious action would be to move the student out of my class. But actually, in my view, even better would be to just sit us down and have a conversation about how we have different views, but let's try and work through this and work together and go from there, rather than what they did say, which is, you can't even be in the classroom with everyone else because of this one student who disagrees with you.
Why do you think these schools are taking these stances?
I think a lot of people in schools are probably of a particular political persuasion. Obviously, there's teachers' unions and things, and so that probably has an impact. I think also a lot of teachers just don't want to rock the boat.
In ruling against Mr. Sutcliffe, the judge recognised his right to believe one can't change their gender, but said he is not entitled to, quote, fail to treat transgender, gay and lesbian pupils with anything short of the dignity and respect with which all school children must be treated. The judge went on to say this case was about, quote, a teacher who deliberately used female pronouns to refer to a transgender male pupil. Andrea Williams says she has fought gender ideology for years, and the table is finally beginning to turn culturally. Yet fears are mounting Labour will destroy any progress that's been made. Just take a look at what the Cabinet said on trans issues.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix, David?
I don't know if it's transphobic, but it's not accurate, Nick. I mean, obviously, it's probably the case that only that trans women don't have ovaries, but a cervix, I understand, is something that you can have following various procedures.
Trans woman with a penis would use which lavatory?
Well, look, I think it's important that all people feel safe and have dignity and
No, but she needs to go to the lavatory. Which one does she use?
I think there are a range of options that would...
Well, she hasn't got a range of options, respectfully. She's got a door with a woman on it, she's got a door with a bloke on it. Which one does she go in, Bridget Phillipson?
I would want people to treat one another with respect.
She needs to use the lavatory, Shadow Secretary of State. Which one is she to use?
Keir Starmer has repeatedly been ridiculed for his inability to define the word woman.
A woman can have a penis.
Nick, I'm not... I don't think we can conduct this debate with,
Sorry, have I offended you in some way?
No, it's just... No, I just...
A woman can have a penis.
I don't think that discussing this issue in this way helps anyone in the long run.
And the party is committed to ending what it calls conversion therapy.
Labour will offer the country to pick up legislating to protect the LGBT community with a comprehensive trans-inclusive ban on conversion therapy. I would have liked to get it done sooner. It will happen. We just have to make progress, and it's very sad that, as honourable friend said, it's taken longer than the Brexit negotiations.
Some worry this will mean it could become illegal to question gender transition. GB News has decided to keep the identity of the school at the centre of this row anonymous. Here is their statement. Ours is an inclusive school which represents and works with a diverse group of local families and staff. The school works with everyone in the community to encourage tolerance and respect regarding their views, lifestyles and beliefs, and heritage and backgrounds. This fundamental principle is at the heart of the school and sits at the centre of what we all understand about British values. The executive principal has spoken this year to all students about celebrating the differences we see around the school, but also to reach out to identify what we hold in common with one another. These similarities help build a cohesive community based upon the school's core values of kindness and trust. Whilst we do not comment on individual cases, we are always willing to engage with and listen to any member of our community to ensure their voice is heard. Nicholas Dunning, GB News.